Everyone, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I have another great podcaster on the show as my guest co-host. Tabatha is here, and I've been listening to her show, enjoying it so much. What went wrong? I love 3 W's in a row. That's really fun. What Went Wrong is a great podcast. You all need to go check it out. We'll have links for it in the podcast notes. As always, Tabatha's here. Nothing's going to go wrong because Tabatha's here, so we're happy with that. Welcome to the show, Tabatha. Nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, David, for having me. And here's the thing. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong, right? Like it's going to lead to the right. So it doesn't matter.
Nothing's going to go wrong. I'm so happy because you are in control. We're having a great conversation. It'll be fun. Tell everybody about your show. Like, when did it start? What's it about?
Yeah, so we started officially in January, and we, of course, if you're doing a podcast, like the pre-planning, I guess, started kind of in November. Okay. I had done a podcast in 2018, kind of more of my like life and fitness and coaching. And I think I have like 8 episodes or something like that. And so, and it was not that I didn't want to do it. It was just the overwhelm of all the things that you have to do with the podcast. So I paused it. So when I decided to take this leap again, a friend of mine is the one who was just really like, you need to have a platform for people to come on. And, I was like, I don't know if I want to do the podcast again. And so when I decided to do the podcast again, I was like, I have to do this. I have to have a team. Like, I can't do this all on my own. There's just too many other things that, like with business and life and stuff. And so when we decided to do this, I was like, I want it to be about stories. I knew that. I knew I just didn't want another business podcast. Not that those are awesome, but they're everywhere. And I wanted something where somebody could hear somebody's story and be affected to move, to make a leap, to give them hope again. And so we just came up with this tagline, me and this other guy, RJ, that he's on my team. We just were, going back and forth. And I didn't know if I wanted to have the tag, like the title be kind of a negative thing, like what went wrong. That sounds so like pessimistic, right? But what I liked about it is everybody can relate to it, because everything in life, like there's always something that goes wrong. Like even in the best situations, every day I think we can say like, oh, well, that went wrong today, or this went wrong today, So it was something that was very relatable to people. And I think that draws them in like, oh man, I want to hear about like what went wrong for that person. And then just human nature. I've learned in the business world, we don't try to change human nature, because people are just naturally pulled toward these stories. This is why media and why news always leads with the bad, because people are like, I'm drawn to that. But what's different about ours is we don't just give you the bad, like, oh, this person was addicted to drugs and they killed themselves. Goodbye. It's no, this is what went wrong. And then guess what? They went through this, they did this struggle, and then something happened. They read a book, they listened to a podcast, they did the work, and this is where they're at today. Now, that doesn't mean they're on the holy ground for the rest of their life and they're never going to go through a struggle, but it's, hey, I went through this really bad thing and I got through it. So I know no matter what, the next bad thing that's going to happen to me, because there'll be another storm, I can get through it. And so you can get through it if you're going through a struggle right now, whether that's financial, relationship, health, it doesn't matter. Giving you that tenacity, those characteristics, learning that in other people's stories, I just think is what's so tantalizing about it. And so that's what we long to do. We're a baby show, we just started in January. So we have a lot of room to grow, but we have a lot of different situations, like people's stories. There's nothing that's alike. Even if I have somebody, I've had quite a few people that have been, addicts that got addicted to something, but every story is so different that I think that's what's captivating as well.
Nice. Okay. And talk a little bit more about your team, because I've had people reach out and go, Dave, I would like to build a team, but I don't know how to do it or who to look for, what team members I need, how many people on your team for the show, and tell me a little bit about their roles, how they support you.
So I hired a company who already had everything set up. So if you're new, I say, hey, and connect with me like via Facebook, Instagram, because my guy RJ is amazing. He's always taking new clients, and he has built an infrastructure that I didn't have to build, which I think is awesome. And he was so price comparable, meaning like as a startup podcast, I was like, I don't have like endless amounts of cash that I can just put into this because podcasting, it's not like instant revenue, right? So it's like I had to look at the cost as well as an investment, not just a cost, like investing into my business and looking at this. So RJ, he already had a team that was editing audio, video, coming up with titles. I come up with titles too. We collaborate on something. Some things I just let him handle and say, hey, go for it. But anything that I don't like or want, he is like, you are the boss, but this is our expertise. Like, this is what we're seeing the trends of podcasting, because this is what they do and this is what they've done for years. And so they see the trends, even with the title. Like I said, I was hesitant about the title because I am a positive person and I want to bring positivity and hope to people right now, because I feel like we're kind of struggling with that. So I wanted to bring, I wanted it to be more of a lighthearted. And he said, Tab, this will get people to listen. And then when they're in it, that's when they get the hope. Like, these are the things. And then we worked with like the different taglines and we'd go back and forth. And even the picture, like they kind of wanted a picture of me with like my microphone, like smiling and this. And I was like, if somebody told me a story that shocked me, I don't have a very good poker face, right? So like if somebody tells me something like, I was sleeping with a gun under my pillow, hoping and praying that I could pull the trigger the next day, which is a story that I was told. Like, my face is like this, like, like I'm not going to be like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to be like shocked. And so when we were coming up with pictures for this, I sent him this picture and I said, this is me authentically, like when I'm hearing these stories, like this is like my shocked face, because some of these stories are so shocking to me, as they should be. I feel like if it doesn't shock you, you're a culture of like, you've been inundated with too many negative things, right? And so just working with them, they were just so good about the back and forth and my integrity, like my creative integrity, but matching them with what they've done. And they offer some services that I don't even take advantage of right now, because I had a Rolodex of people that I already knew to come into my podcast, but they can help you find podcast guests as well.
Good.
So like, I think that helps, just getting people like, okay, because I don't know where to start and I don't know who to have, and where that is. PodMatch was another great resource that has just, I think in May is when I started. And so that has been an amazing resource. And I consider them on my team because they're helping me find people and helping me get on more platforms. And so all of that is like my little team. It's like I can do the interview and send it off, and then I can just go and kind of network with people and research people to see like, hey, are they a good fit for my podcast, or am I a good fit for this podcast? And I can do that kind of sort of thing. And they get to do like the back end, the techie stuff that I don't want to do and I just don't have time to do. And then I can work on monetizing my podcast, because if you're spending all the time in the doing of the podcast, it's really hard to figure out how to monetize the podcast. And so I try to spend my creative juices on monetization of the podcast.
Okay. And does the listeners for your show lead to potentially working with you as a coach and as a consultant then as well?
Yeah. So that's always kind of, that's the dream of why I do this, is not only to give people these great stories and to uplift the guests, but hey, like we have little inserts, little midtros in there. Like if you want to be on our Legacy Wealth project, or, connect with us here or this website. And I'm learning the different things to make that more presentable and promotional. And, again, this is all new to me. Podcasting is just a small portion of my business. And so if this is something for you that's like, no, this is all I want to do and I want to, then go hard at it. Like there's a lot of different ways that you can monetize it and make it better. We use this specifically as a way to be like, hey, come to our website, get this free resource, become a client of ours, join our program, whatever we have going on. Hey, join this live event coming up, that type of thing. You want to join PodMatch, different affiliate things that we have going on. But for the most part, it's like, hey, if you want to be in our world and learn about legacy wealth and creating wealth for your family, join us here. And we have little metros for that.
Excellent. I actually have Alex Sanfilippo from PodMatch coming on my show in the future. So I'm looking forward to having him come on, because I love PodMatch as well. I've met some amazing people on there already. And I'm using it kind of as a very small advertising budget to promote my show to get in front of more listeners and more other podcasters as well. So I'd much rather invest in PodMatch than pay money somewhere else where I might not get a good return. I'm advertising through PodMatch to guest opportunities. And that's like I'm fishing where the fish are, really, because everyone there is looking to be on a podcast or they are a podcast. So it's a really great way to take my money and put it somewhere where it's going to benefit me as well, to find great people like you. And that's how we connected as well. So it's good. So a lot of podcasters that I talk to are doing this as a hobby. They don't have a business tied to it. And I think that we kind of get a little one-sided in our conversation around doing it ourselves. And I like you coming on and giving us a totally different outlook on podcasting and how it works with a business instead. So I like to lean more into that because I have coaches that listen to the show and they're just like you, but they haven't started yet. So from a coach's perspective, the value of podcasting for you, I know you have you have like a marketing budget that you would spend somewhere to promote what you do, but then taking a portion of that and using it towards podcasting, the benefits for you as a coach. If you were listening to this and you didn't have a show, what would you say to another fellow coach around the value of podcasting to support what you do?
Well, I think the first thing that you need to ask is like why you're doing it, right? Like when I did it in 2018, I wanted to get the knowledge that I had out to my audience in another way. That was my dominant thought process. And hey, if I could get out to people, they could join my program, my list, that type of thing. And so you have to ask yourself like why you're doing this and what sort of podcast. Like I told you guys at the beginning, I wanted to share stories with people. I knew that was really important. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do that or what it would lead to, but I was like, this is the premise. Maybe you want to give out, hacks and tips and things that you've learned along the way. You want to just do it like 15-minute. I know Russell Brunson, when he first did his, like he did like 10-minute, like marketing secrets, just like that's what he wanted to do. You have to narrow that. And I tell you this because you have to have that why. Because if you have businesses, and especially if you have any family, kids, spouse, whatever, and you don't have that why locked down, it can get discouraging. Because even with my team, there are times that I'm like tired or like, oh, like if I've done 3 or 4 or 5 interviews in a day, or I have to like, I don't go and edit them, but I'll go back through a little bit and I'll kind of help with like making sure the taglines are right, and things like that, going back through, getting them on my YouTube, trying to expand my YouTube channel so I have more people, more eyeballs on it, right? So like it's still a portion of my business. So I have to go back to that why, because sometimes I'm like, what's the point? Is this even getting me clients? Because at the end of the day, for me, it is about exposure, getting making this a monetization, because for me, I don't want an expensive hobby. Like I love this. I know I'm called to do this. It's also led me to get my voice and my messaging out right, my stories, connect with other people. So there's definitely different facets, because I'm meeting other people where I'm like, man, when I do a high level mastermind, like that's the person that I want in there, right? Like I'm learning different things, how an interview, how to listen, how to have conversations. So those skill sets are so important that those are what keep me in it when like maybe the money's not flowing from the podcast. Cause I can go back to like, well, this is a small portion of my time, really, when I really boil it down to, it's a small portion of my time and my energy. And is it increasing my skill set in communication? Yes. Is it increasing my skill set in effective communication and marketing and networking? And what do I need to do differently if it's not doing those things? And so if you're a coach or creator or even a business owner and you're like, well, Tab, what's the bottom line? Because I'm all about the bottom line. I'm like, what's this return on investment here? But sometimes that investment isn't always monetary, because I'm investing in my skill sets right now. Because like I said, I'm a baby podcaster. And if you think for 1 minute that just because you've done 100 podcasts, you're not a baby, you still are. Because I've done over 100 podcasts this year alone, and I'm still a baby because I'm learning. And I'm, it's like when that baby learns to walk, when they walk on their own, they don't just all of a sudden start sprinting, right? You don't just put them in like this sprinting class, like, okay, let's get your 100-meter dash, right? Like they first kind of run, and then they run and they fall and they laugh and they get up, and then, they run a little bit faster. And, you have these dreams and these things. It's the same with podcasting. It's like, you got to crawl first, and then you just got to get up and you got to take those few steps, and you're going to have those bad interviews, and you're going to have the bad interviews where you're the bad interviewee. And, And you have to dust yourself off and say, but why am I doing this? I'm learning a new skill set. That's going to take some time. I'm networking with people. I've had some people on my show that I thought for sure I vetted them very well. And they got on my show and it was like a train wreck. And I was like, whoa, okay. Like I clearly didn't communicate what I needed there, but I was able to connect with them and still give them value and not make them feel horrible about the interview, right? So like all of those things I am learning and growing as my entrepreneur, but now it's like I still have to monetize it. So I can't just say, okay, it's fine here. I need to say, okay, but what do I need to change it so that this can be a source of income and I can invest more time, money, effort if I'm loving this. And if you're not loving it, like I actually would not prefer, I like doing shows that are like, hey, these are the 3 hacks, these are the 3 tips, because I love those. I love to listen to those and I can like name those off. But that's my comfort zone. For me to stop and interview somebody and listen to their story and find value and help my audience find value in little nuggets, that was a little bit of a challenge for me. And so I like that because it keeps it exciting. So I'd say that too, like do something that like stretches you a little bit. And like I'm doing outreach on people who are like high level. And so it's like even getting in my comfort zone of being like, hey, would you want to come on my show? When I know that you're probably invited on 10,000 podcasts, so getting out of my comfort zone and stuff is very important for me. And it should be for your listeners too, because that's where your growth really happens.
Yeah. It's that whole baseball thing where the batter comes up to the plate, points off in the distance to where the ball is going to go, and then hits the ball in that direction. I love that kind of confidence. Like this one's going over the fence. And I love that you can do that with your guests. You can walk up and go, that's my guest. It's just a matter of time, but they're going to be on my show. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so how are you growing then as a person? What you talked about your skill sets and everything. What's different about you now with this many episodes than like the first few episodes? How are you different?
I'd have to go back and look. I think just confidence and listening to my guests, maybe asking different questions. I think what's actually helped me grow is being a podcast guest and getting my story out there and perfecting my messaging and really honing in on those things and humbling myself too, and just being like, I don't care how small the podcast is. It is my honor to be on somebody's platform, whether they have 1 listener or 10,000, right? And so I think I always have to check myself. And I think everybody does, because the more you do something, just naturally we're like, oh, why am I doing this? And it's like, no, because I am perfecting a skill set, even if it's one person's life's change, even if honestly, a lot of times the podcaster who's interviewing me will be like, oh my gosh, I got so much out of that. And I'm like, I'm an audience, like I'm a energy person. So I prefer to speak to a live audience. So speaking on a podcast sometimes for me is a little more difficult because I don't know how the audience is reading it. I can read the audience and like change story and change my mannerisms. But on a podcast, you're just just 2 people.
You're right.
So learning to still deliver, even when I don't have that live audience, and just envisioning them like that they are receiving this so that I'm confident in what I'm saying and not like diluting it down or like, taking my personality and, well, I'm not sure if they're going to like this, or if the person who's interviewing me isn't matching me for energy. Like I still keep that energy up and I still am true to who I am, even if they derail me with some different questions and stuff, and staying focused on like why I'm there and that it's about the audience. It's not about me. And so just learning that, because I think naturally when you go to public speak, no matter what platform you're on, it's like we get those nerves because we make it about ourselves. And so when I can just stand back and be like, no, how can I serve the audience right now in this moment with the skill set I have? How can I perfect this better than I have before and show up? Just showing up. I did one podcast interview where my eardrum broke. Like I was in so much pain and I finished the interview. Like, I mean, it was like I was going to deliver for this person, right? And it's just showing up even when I don't want to. It's like I do it anyway. I'm going to show up and do this. And I think over the course of the last 6 months, that's what has been my biggest breakthrough of like, okay, I'm not quite seeing the monetary value yet, but these are all seeds planted. Like I have to believe that, and changing and tweaking stuff. So I'm not doing the same thing, expecting a different result, but still understanding that like the seeds that you plant, it might take a little bit to harvest. And as long as I'm watering them, as long as I'm going back and not just doing the same thing, I'm tweaking it, I'm making it better, I'm improving my skill set, my networking, all of those things, that the harvest will come. Right. And so that's the revelation, I guess, that I've had the past 6 months.
Yeah. And one thing I say to my guests when they come on as a pre-interview, usually chat with them in advance, I just tell them the most important person that's going to be part of this podcast is not you as the guest, and it's not me as the host. It's the listener. Because we want a great connection between the listener and you as the guest so that they will follow through and look at your book or your coaching program I want to build that bridge. So we want to make sure that we're focused all of our attention on them. So when I have a guest come on my show and all they want to do is sell something to an imaginary audience, that connection's not as strong as you coming on as a guest and talking to the listener who's listening to this right now and making a connection with them. Because without them, this is really a conversation between two people. It's not going to really go anywhere. So the more we can connect with that listener, the better. So to that listener, Tabatha, that's listening to this right now, speak to them, encourage them as a new podcaster, as somebody who wants to grow their show. What kind of words of wisdom and encouragement do you have for that new podcaster?
Well, again, you have to start with the why, but then wherever you're at, like, again, guys, I started one 2018 and I was gung-ho, like, I'm going to do this. And then I didn't. And then I just drug my feet because I let the past stop me, like, oh, the discouragement and how hard this was. And, oh, it's going to take so much time, and blah, 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 the story, right? And especially like being a mom and having multiple businesses, I was like, oh, is it really worth it? And I stopped, and because I only looked at the money part of it. And you have to, like you do. You can't just have another expensive hobby unless you have a business that can support it and run freely. And this is your hobby and you just love it. Fantastic. But I don't think that that's who I'm really speaking to today. I think you're somebody who loves it, but you're not quite sure how to monetize it. Or, how long, because that's a question a lot of people, how long do I go before, I quit because it's not working, right? Well, you go as long as your heart tells you when you're pivoting and changing things. So you don't want to just do the same thing, like do the interview to the same person and you're not getting any downloads and you're not getting the stuff and you're like 20 episodes in. You gotta tweak something. Again, look at yourself humbly and say, is it me as an interviewee? Is it my interviewers? Like what's me being a host? Like, are my guests dull? Am I dull? Do I need to take a class? Like an actor would take a class, right? To become an actor. And so as a podcast host, do I need to take a few classes? Do I need to get a coach? Do I need to look at this, like how to monetize it? Now, here's the caveat to that. You're going to go out there, start looking, and there's going to be 10,000 options. And you're going to have this analysis paralysis. And so it's like, you can't let that stop you either. Again, when you're going back to the why, we always did this podcast. I never intentionally did it like to get sponsorships, but of course that's a way that I can get money. So I'm not going to like turn it away, but I'm not like chasing that right now. What I want is people to come into my program and or click an affiliate link. Like I'm an affiliate with PodMatch. I'm an affiliate with Scalable because those are things that help businesses. So if I can help businesses like with or podcasters, PodMatch is for that, RJ for my podcasting editing. If I refer someone to him, I get a benefit of that. But you also get a benefit to it because you're actually going to follow through on the podcast. And he's going to help you and show you things that can make it, even better when you're on your YouTube channel, when you're for downloads on different rankings and all of those things. He's going to help you so that you stick to why you're doing this and what you're doing this for. And so don't let the past of like what you've done before or what other people are telling you. And I would say steer away from DMs. I get so many DMs that are like, do you want to help get your podcast on the Apple charts? Like a lot. Don't waste your money on that. Like, I'm not saying that there's not valid points of being that, but like you have to look again of who the audience that you're serving, what back end service are you doing? So like we do high level coaching. So I want somebody to know, like, and trust me. If they need to listen to me for 6 months before they have that conversation with me, because when you're investing any money with me, I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to feel like we're friends. We're sitting on the couch, like doing this thing, because I want you to reach your full potential in your relationship, in your life, whatever we're in your real estate, whatever it is that I'm coaching somebody on. I want them to feel like they can pour out their heart and soul to me. So that was another reason why I did this podcast. Cause I'm like, if I can get people to feel like we've been talking for 6 months, then when we have a call about like, hey, I'm going to help up level your business, your real estate, your wealth, your family life, they can feel like, yes, ma'am, like we know each other. And so have that in the back of your head too, because if somebody is listening to you for 6 months, when you have that sales call, when you have that program, whatever, they're going to feel so much more pulled to want to buy with you.
Yeah, you've built that bridge with them already in advance, right? You've done all the groundwork, and they're just ready to. They have you in their head. They hear your voice. They identify with you. They've heard your stories, your little inside jokes, and things you've done. They already feel like they know you, and they feel like they already have a welcome spot on that couch beside you, just because of your podcast. Okay, one of the things I do on my show, Tabatha, is I do what I call a question of the month. Other people do this too, but I do a question of the month to my podcast audience, and I ask them to respond by going to my SpeakPipe on my website, which allows them to leave a voice message. Go to my SpeakPipe, tell me your name, the name of your show, and then answer the question of the month. And so what I do when I have guests on during the month, like you on the show, okay, is I ask you to do this as well. And I'm going to take this section out and make a copy and put it in like a combined episode with a bunch of other podcasters responding to the question of the month so that we can shout out your show. That's the main reason. But then get your feedback on the question of the month. So would you be willing to do that right here in the podcast?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So you're going to you're going to introduce yourself, shout out the name of your podcast. And the question that I have for you and for the month of July is, do you listen to your own podcast? Yes or no? Why or why not? Okay. So you ready to do this right from the top?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to count you in 3, 2, 1, go.
Hi, I'm Tabatha Thorell, host of the What Went Wrong podcast, the untold stories of bouncing back from failure. And I do not listen to my own podcast because I am so critical of myself that I can always find the wrong in the episode. And then it just makes me self-conscious the next time that I do an interview.
Perfect. I love that because I'm getting some interesting responses, yes and no.
Yeah.
And for very different reasons. So I love that you brought that out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting.
My husband listens to all of them and he lets me know if there's any blurps that need to be edited. He's like, they cut this off, or, oh, you sounded bad in this one. And I'm like, okay. And I trust him because he is less critical of me, but critical enough to make it good. But I'm just way too critical. Like, I will listen to my guest part. Like, I go back and I'll listen to my guests in between of different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I steer away from it. I mean, I've done it. I have listened to them, but like, I don't just go on like, workouts and like listen to it like I do other people's podcasts now.
Okay. Awesome. And that's a nice thing about having a team though, as well,
yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
You have a team that does all this for you. You don't need to do it as if you were doing it yourself.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you have an extra set of ears and eyes that are helping you. So that's another value of having a team.
Yes, absolutely.
Smart. Okay, so how are you learning? How are you getting better at the craft of podcasting then? If you're not listening to your show on a regular basis, where are you learning how to do this better? Just by doing it?
Just by number one, doing it. Because it's like, there's no classroom. There's nothing I could listen to. But I listen to other speakers. I listen to other podcast hosts of like how they engage. But I also do that with kind of a grain of salt because I'm like, everybody has their own flavor and I don't want to mimic anybody. But I do look at like, okay, how are they engaging there? A lot of times I just listen to like engaging speakers. And podcast is, yes, a little bit different than just like a preacher on a stage, but my whole thing is to captivate an audience. And so what ways are they doing that? And even just by me listening to those speakers and not taking any notes or anything, just auditory And then when I'll go on walks. We live in a rural area. So in the country, I'll go on walks and I'm a verbal processor. So I'll just say things out loud and I'll change the tonality of my voice. And that's practice. So it's not like sitting there like, okay, tell me about this interview, but it's just practicing the art of speaking and communicating. And I'm reading books and different insights on effective communication, because that's what we're doing here. We're communicating a message, how I can be more of an effective host when I'm reaching out to people, and getting their stories, but also not going so overboard, because I like the stories to just be very authentic. And when I hear their stories, I'm hearing it for the first time. So
Okay,
I like that spontaneity, because I feel like the audience, because then I speak like the audience would, right? Like if I'm hearing it for the first time, most likely my audience is going to have that same question, rather if I like sat on there and stewed on it, because then they might, it's like, so I'm like right there engaging with, sometimes I've heard a blip of it. Like I'll say, hey, do you have a story? And they'll kind of share, and I'm like, okay, let's wait. And then I'll hear like the depth of it. And so I like that. But yeah, just doing the verbal, just doing the action of it. But I am constantly listening to different speakers and different podcasters, and just honing my craft of communication, because that helps me in my life. It's not just podcasting for me. So I like that. It's like I can communicate to my family and businesses and negotiations and all of those things. That's going to help serve me in every area, especially coaches on here. If you have a lot of coach listeners, when you're a podcaster, especially if you're like someone who's hosting and you're interviewing, that is just practicing your craft. Like that is practicing your listening skills and really going in depth of like, what is that person trying to share in that message?
Okay. And then the whole thing around mindset for people getting their message out to the world, feeling, again, we talk about imposter syndrome on a regular basis, but the fact that you were always struggling with who cares what I have to say, or why should I have a platform? Who's going to press play on my show? In a world of amazing podcasters, how do I fit in? Again, can you kind of speak to that and how we can overcome that?
So don't listen to yourself. No, that's mine. I get imposter syndrome when I listen. I think that's why I do it. No, but you do have to know what triggers you. Like I know that triggers me. So if I want to move forward, I'm not going to do something that triggers me. So you do have to know yourself very well, right? And if you are on here and you're starting a podcast, a little inside of you, like you have something to give. Like you're not completely imposter. I think sometimes we like over exaggerate this. Like Tony Robbins says, we've made it a syndrome, like it's in a book, like this big thing. No, you're just feeling insecure. And that's because you're not doing it enough. Because if you do it enough, I promise you, because when I first started this in January, I set a goal to be on 100 stages or 100 platforms of podcasts. And I said, I don't care what that is. Like if it has any realm. So I had grief because I've lost my mom and my sister. I had relationship. I had body. I had parenting. I had real estate. I had speaking, coaching, any platform that remotely I had any experience in, I was going to speak on it. And I was like, I'm just going to do this. And the one that scared me the most was high level business and real estate. Well, we have a 7-figure real estate portfolio, and we have for years. And yet I still felt insecure in that. But I said, nope, I would not overanalyze. I would just click on there and I tell people what I had to value, and I would just go and I would do it scared. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, do it anyway. If you're scared, do it anyway. If you don't have all the answers, do it anyway. If whatever, do it anyway, because the doing is what gives you the confidence. It is not this big syndrome. It's not this big overtaking. The fear is because you're insecure about looking stupid. Well, then that we make it about ourselves again. If you literally have something that can help someone. Now, are you going to get people who are negative who say, what do you know about this? And you aren't a size 0. How dare you give fitness tips, or, whatever. You're going to have that. Like, I hate to tell you this, but like, if you're afraid of the negativity, then don't do a podcast, because people are critical, right? But if you say, I want to help even one person, one listener on here, so I have to get over myself, the fear of myself, looking stupid, being embarrassed. And there have been some times when I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't ask me this question, and people podcasters will say, is there a question that you aren't comfortable with? And I always say no, because if they ask me it and I am uncomfortable, I will grow in that question. I know that I might look stupid for a minute, but the audience is going to look at my vulnerability, and I'll tell people, I'll be like, you know what? This makes me so uncomfortable talking about this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I guarantee that listener's like, okay, what's she going to say? Like they're hooked. And so being vulnerable, saying I'm scared, even as a host, your first ones, being like, you know what? Thank you for listening to my show, guys. This is my second episode. I'm still shaking in my boots, but I'm here because I want you, right? That breaks it. And that makes it so much more fun. And just know you're not going to be good. I still don't think I'm good. And so it's like, that's okay because you don't have a lot of listeners in the beginning, and that's okay because you're not good. So it's like, I'm glad I didn't like skyrocket the charts, because then people would have been like, oh, she's disappointing. So it's like, you have that slow growth for a reason. Take the stairs, not the elevator, and experience that every step that muscle is growing and you're learning. And it's harder, right? It's harder taking the stairs than it is the elevator. But every step you're growing, and your cardiovascular, your muscles, and everything. In podcasting, it's your verbal skills, it's your tonality of your voice, it's your communication skills. It's all about learning because you're doing it, and just do it.
Right. Great. That's great advice, Tabatha. I love this. This is really good. And this advice comes through experience. And the only way you're going to get experience is to start, right? The best authors had a day when they had to sit down and write their first word, and that's how they became a best author, right? A podcaster had to hit record for the first time and go, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't even know if this is good. The best chef had to put some kind of food together in one recipe and go, I hope you like it. Everybody starts at the same spot. So don't worry about that and just start. That's the key point. It's good. It's good. What else are we missing, Tabatha? What have we not touched on that we need to leave a listener with to encourage them on their journey in content creation, podcast, coaching, writing a book? There's all content, right, that we're building in the world. Yes. Anything else that we're missing that we really need to end off with?
Just don't be boring. That's what I tell people. Like, it's like, just spice it up a bit. Most people live a very mundane life. That's why they're listening to a podcast, because they're like, I gotta like get something here, add humor in it, get to that emotion. Just you even being the host, just bring that energy, bring it. Because I have been on, like I said, I've been on a lot of podcasts, and I can't believe how many podcast hosts are just so mundane about stuff and just like this and tell me about this. And they ask the same questions. And it's like, okay, like literally there are thousands upon thousands, millions, probably millions. I don't even know how many podcasts there are, right? And not very many of them make past 10 episodes. So it's like, if you really want to have impact, you have to learn to captivate. And I'm guessing that's why you're doing this. You're not just doing this to hear your own voice. And so it's like, you have to learn to captivate. I don't care if it's a book. I don't care if it's a podcast, YouTube, advertising, anything. You have to captivate that audience, because we live in this world, and it's a fast-paced but mundane world. Is that crazy? It's like, you would think that we're all like living it up because our world is so fast-paced. But most people live in this quiet desperation and this mundane, mediocre, Groundhog Day life. And they're wanting something to just trigger them. And it could be a word that you say. It could be anything that just like, oh my gosh, I'm just connected with them. And maybe it's just that one story. Maybe they never buy into your business. Maybe they never listen to it again. But that one moment shifted them. And they're the next, whatever big thing, or their kid is, or whatever, the ripple effect, you may never know it. But I just always think it. So I might never know the ripple effect, but I just know it. Like, I know I have a ripple effect. And if you just go with that, that will give you the confidence. Like, I will have a ripple effect today. I will, no matter what, because I've given everything I can, and I'll never know. You can't tell me yes or no, David. You can't say no, you didn't. Mm-hmm. So like, the truth is in the statement. So when you say you will have a butterfly effect of positivity, own it and do it. And then then you will go. You will not stop, because knowing that is so empowering. Like, I will have a positive effect on people. then that will help you from stopping.
Yep. And every single stone thrown into a crystal clear, flat as glass lake has no idea the ripple is going to cause.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have any control over the ripples that it causes. Exactly. It just knows it's going to cause a ripple. So throw your stones, everybody. Throw them in the pond. Get out there, share your story, because you're going to reach somebody that I can't reach. I can't reach the people that you have on your show. You're the host of your show. I can't do your show. So if you don't do your show, no one's doing your show. And all of the people that you've been able to reach to date and into the future could only happen because of you. So
exactly,
it's good. That's what we want. Yeah. We want more of that.
Yes.
I love it. Okay, this is what I love about doing podcasting is I get to meet great people. I would love to have you come in the future and give us updates and come back and share more around podcasting. I think we just touched like a few things. There's so much more to talk about. Yeah. So keep me in mind. I would love to have you back in the future as a guest co-host in the future. But before we go, Tabatha, again, take us to the podcast. And maybe where's a good starting point? Like episode 1, where do we go as a new listener to your show?
Oh, yeah.
Where would you like to send us?
So What Went Wrong, the Untold Stories of Bouncing Back. And we're on every podcast platform and YouTube. So we video at all of ours, which I just think gives, I know most people listen to it like in the car and working out, but I think sometimes seeing a visual, especially if some of my guests, you'll hear their stories and you're like, I have to see their face. I want to see this person. Honestly, you can start at any episode because they're all different stories. Now, when we first started, and I might do a few this summer, I did a few solo episodes where I told stories of entrepreneur that you might not have known, kind of the untold stories of like I did like Heinz Ketchup, I did the Dyson vacuum, Post-it, like different things of like success stories that were intriguing to me. And I always tell people, if you like those episodes, let us know, like comment on them, and especially in YouTube, because you can do the comments there. And we'll do more shows of that, because I think that that's kind of fun too. It's kind of, we used to have a radio host called Par Harvey, and he'd do the rest of the story, right? So I
love those.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that. It's like stories that we hear of successes, but you don't always hear the failures of that. Or you heard a failure, but it was like, oh, they were bankrupt. No, like we go deep into the story. So we have some of those episodes, but honestly, start with one and go binge watch, binge listen, because all the stories are really great, but you can really start anywhere and get value on any of the stories that we share.
Excellent. Thank you for making time to do this.
Yes,
you're a very busy person, David. And to give us your time and to share your insights is great. I've heard so many good stuff from you today. I'm going to have to re-listen to this twice. I do listen to my own podcast because I love my guests so much that I want to hear them again and again and again.
I listen to the guest part because my guests talk.
Yes.
For like the first 10 minutes, and I'll listen to their stories again because it's very intriguing. But I kind of fast forward through mine. It's like you do the 2x of your own voice, like go through that fast and then do that. So that's what I do.
Yeah. Okay, good. See, I like that. Everyone, all information for Tabatha and her show will be in the show notes. Go over, give her a listen, a like, a follow, a share. Go listen. When you listen to her episode, listen to the entirety of her episodes, because that's an indication to Apple, Spotify, YouTube, that this is a good podcast. This is good content.
Yeah.
Because everybody that comes stays to the end. Yep. That's a good signal. And it's a great way to support podcasters. They get their stuff shown to more people. Just by you listening and your listening habits can help Tabatha grow her podcast. So please listen to the end of every episode. That's your thing that you can do to help her podcast grow. Tabatha, thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you so much, David.
Hey, thanks for being here at the end of the podcast. This is just for you because you're still here. Thank you for your support for the podcast. Thank you for listening to the show, sharing it with other podcasters. Maybe somebody you know is thinking about starting a show. I would love for you to say, hey, wait. You should go check out the How to Podcast series. It's got everything you need. And Dave as well is included. You get one free Dave with the How to Podcast series. I'm included with it. So kind of a bundle thing you get. To that point, mentioning it in the podcast, definitely want to remind you here at the end, there's a link in the show notes. Starting it this summer, I'm working through this. It's a way for us, you and I, to have a conversation around podcasting. I want to help you. And I've been doing this for people who listen to the show now for almost 3 years. And I just haven't been promoting it as a thing. So I'm now promoting it as a thing. I want to spend time with you. I kind of would love to hear your voice. We're going to jump on Zoom together. We're going to talk about your podcast. You get time one-on-one with me, 30 minutes in my calendar, completely free, no strings attached. You don't have to buy a blender or a vacuum or none of that stuff. No. Just us. I just like to help you. And whether you're thinking about starting a show or you have a show, you want to grow your show, whatever it is, I'd love to meet you, talk about your struggles, your questions, work together. And I am eventually developing this into more of a coaching program for podcasters. But I'm starting with my best friends first, for free. So if you're interested, you listen to the show, and I appreciate you. Link in the show notes. Let's get together and talk podcasting, okay? You and me. Let's talk. Let's talk soon. See you. Thanks.